The first attempt void lay before Admiral Kyra Velenek, like a boundless stretching of black velvet, punctuated only by the distant glare of gamma-bright pulsars and the shimmer of nebular wisps. She stood at the bridge of the Carillion, dreadnought Tyron's woe, her tall, lithe frame poised in the glow of holoscreens that flickered with streams of data. Centuries of exploration, conquest, and scientific triumph had culminated in this moment. Her task force was poised to perform the most exhaustive sensor sweep in Carillion history. And yet, nothing in her storied career had prepared her for the enigma that drifted only 10,000 clicks ahead. A human warship known to its crew as the USS Thunderstorm. Status report. She commanded, her voice calm but tinged with a rare undercurrent of tension. Lieutenant Merle, her chief sensor officer, toggled a series of controls. Holographic arcs of color painted themselves across the main view screen. Tachyon diffraction, patterns, gravimetric undulations, subspace resonances, all converged upon the silhouette of the Thunderstorm, a sleek, formidable vessel whose hull was a complex lattice of reactive metals and energy conduits that pulsed with cobalt light. Admiral Velenek studied the displays, fingers steepling. Beneath her chin, focused the subspace resonator on grid coordinates 14.2 by 43.6. Let's see what ghosts this human ship carries. A low hum filled the bridge as the resonator array phased into operation. Tubes of translucent crystal channeled the power of the ship's quantum reactors, charging the probes that would ripple across the void toward the target. On her command, Merle initiated the sweep. Across the main screen, the resonator beams arched outward in scintillating rainbow streams of exotic particles, designed to probe the Thunderstorm's deep structure. Data points blossomed, then shattered like fragile glass. Alarms flickered. "We're losing coherence," Merle said, his voice a crystalline trill of disbelief. "The resonance pattern, it's collapsing." From peripheral consoles, energy readings once solid and unambiguous began to oscillate wildly. Hull density registered first as 37.6 teracores per cubic meter, then plummeted to near vacuum, only to spike again beyond known crystalline thresholds. Subspace flux oscillated between positive and negative values as though the ship straddled two universes at once. "Impossible," whispered Ensign Terran in comms. "Our sensors can't lock onto a stable signature. It's like trying to grab a shadow in shape-shifting mist." Velenek's heart hammered, a sensation as alien to her as failure. She had led fleets through gravitic storms, brokered peace between warring star nations, and charted the spiral arms of half a dozen galaxies. Yet here, mere kilometers separated her from an adversary she could not define. "Cease the resonator sweep," she ordered, her tone sharper now. Engineers obeyed, retracting the subspace probes before they fractured entirely. A ripple of relief coursed through the crew, but the dread remained. On the view screen, the Thunderstorm drifted serenely, its forward sensors obliviously scanning distant star clusters. The hull's reactive conduits glowed in regular pulses, a heartbeat that seemed almost to mock the Carillion vessel's impotence. Velenek straightened. "Bring up passive scans, photonic, gravimetric, all standard arrays. Let's see if we can track their drive signature at least." "Passive arrays live," Merle reported dubiously, "but our readings are inconsistent. Their drive trail flickers off for seconds, then reappears offset by several thousand kilometers." Velenek leaned forward, adjusting the magnification on her view. The Thunderstorm's silhouette remained crisp to optical scanners. The ship was as real as any warship in the Empire's catalog, but deeper scans betrayed nothing. It was as if the vessel toyed with the very act of observation, allowing only the barest glimpse before dissolving into paradox. "Report to Fleet Command," she decided aloud, voice echoing through the silent bridge. "We need additional assets. Tachyon burst arrays, fractal wave scanners, anything we have left. If this turns into a real engagement." She let the threat hang in the starlit silence. A chime interrupted her thoughts, an incoming communication, symbolized by the Imperial crest. Velenek tapped her console. "Admiral, this is High Chancellor Davacor," came the measured voice of the Carillion Empire's supreme leader, his tone a blend of caution and curiosity. "Your sensors have encountered the human dreadnought Thunderstorm. Preliminary reports indicate an unprecedented failure of our deep skin technology. Describe the phenomenon. Velenek swallowed the rising tightness in her throat. High Chancellor, our resonator probes sustained structural feedback loops. Data collapsed on observation. Passive scans yield only fleeting signatures. The ship's hull composition and drive field cannot be resolved. It appears to actively disrupt our measurements. Fascinating, Davakor mused. The humans are famed for their unpredictability, but nothing in our archives suggests a vessel with such properties. Proceed with utmost caution. Should resolution prove impossible, withdraw and await the Senate's directive. Understood, Velenek replied. Suppressing the frustration coiling in her chest, she ended the link and turned to her XO. Commander, Relin, prepare to disengage any non-essential sensor rays. Maintain visual tracking, but stabilize at maximum safe distance. No closer than 30,000 clicks. Aye, Admiral, Relin answered crisply. Every officer on the bridge felt the tension. It was not fear of battle, but of the unknown. The Corellians prided themselves on mastery of the cosmos. Yet this human creation challenged the very language of their science. Velenek stared at the view, contemplative. The Sunderstorm's blue plasma veins traced patterns that hinted at an intelligence far beyond simple engineering. Humans, she knew, were ingenious, adaptive to extremes, fiercely inventive under constraint, yet to weaponize unpredictability itself. Making their warship evade comprehension was a genius stroke of asymmetric warfare. She tapped the console again. Message to flagship engineering. Produce detailed logs of every sensor anomaly. I want a full analysis by cycles. And contact Academy Labs. Dispatch teams to reverse engineer human artifact samples recovered in the Sol campaign. Maybe there's a clue on it, Relin confirmed. As the Tyrant's woe eased back, its formation followed suit. A flotilla of Corellian cruisers and frigates deployed synchronized arrays to maintain a barrier, but none dared approach too closely. The Sunderstorm drifted alone against the tapestry of stars, a lone sentinel that would not be catalogued, quantified, or predicted. Alone in her command chair, Admiral Velenek allowed herself a moment of unguarded thought. She replayed every detail, the way the resonator field seemed to recoil from the ship, the way their tachyon tracers bent and shimmered like light through turbulent air. That calm measured him from the Sunderstorm's drive cores, oblivious to detection. She pressed a finger to her lip. Gods help us, she murmured. Turning away from the view screen, she straightened her uniform and squared her shoulders. The human enigma would not go unanswered. The Empire had risen to dominance through science and strategy. It would endure by adapting. If the Sunderstorm defied their sensors, then Corellian science would find a new path to comprehension. The void beyond the shields lay empty once more, but the tremor in the tides of power had begun. And somewhere within the silent corridors of the Sunderstorm, human officers looked back at their watchers with quiet satisfaction, knowing they had just rewritten the rulebook of interstellar warfare. Theories and Phalurist Council Chamber of Corellia Prime floated high above the planet's cerulean clouds, its geodesic dome refracting the morning light into prismatic shards across polished obsidian floors. Here, beneath soaring arches of crystalline alloy, the Empire's greatest minds gathered not to celebrate conquest nor to chart new worlds, but to confront an enigma that threatened the very foundation of Corellian science. At the head of a circular table sat High Chancellor Davakor, his silver hair a halo in the ambient glow. To his left, Dr. Kelder, the Empire's foremost quantum theoretician, adjusted his holoprojector. To his right, Dr. Anshiri, specialist in subspace dynamics, tapped impatiently at her datapad. Around them lounged dozens of astrophysicists, engineers, and exobiologists, each clad in the Starfleet gray and bearing the gravity of their charge. Colleagues, Davakor began, voice resonant, we convene at an unprecedented crisis. Our sensors, tachyon resonance arrays, gravimetric probes, fractal wave scanners failed catastrophically against the human vessel known as the USS Sunderstorm. We must determine why. A hush fell as Dr. Kelder summoned the first visualization. In midair, a three-dimensional lattice of colored filaments coalesced into waveforms that pulsed and fractured. Our subspace resonators registered a feedback loop. He explained. On contact, the ship's hull appears to generate a reactive quantum field. Observe, our input signal collapses into noise patterns. Decoheres before any meaningful data can be extracted. He paused. It's as though the ship itself reshapes reality around our probes. Dr. Anshiri leaned forward, fingers brushing the table's edge. Quantum cloaking at this scale is theoretically impossible. Conservation of energy would be violated. The only alternative is an active, self-modifying field and adaptive shell that reconfigures its quantum state in real time. She projected a cascade of diagrams, subspace vortices looping back on themselves, phantom nodes flaring and extinguishing. But even that fails to account for the ship's visible consistency. Under optical and photonic scans, murmurs rippled. Through the chamber, Counselor Riha of Exobioengineering cleared his throat. If the hull is integrated with a living matrix bioengineered to interface with quantum fields, it might exhibit both matter and energy phases. He tapped his implant, bringing forth spectral images of synthetic tissues interwoven with crystalline conduits. We've seen human experiments with adaptive biomaterials. Perhaps they've perfected it aboard their warship, Kelderas. Projection shuddered, a living hull. Fascinating, but speculative. Our gravimetric reads suggest no organic density, and biomat systems degrade under high-stress quantum flux, yet the thunderstorm endured our probes. With no apparent strain, Dr. Shorlin, a veteran of the Sol campaign, spoke next. Remember the reports from the Battle of Gamma 7? Marines recovered fragments of human hull plating that scintillated under tachyon exposure, glowing with a blue iridescence we couldn't replicate. What if their ship uses a field oscillator? Embedded in the plating itself, an array of nanoscale modulators that scramble incoming probes? And Shiri drew in a breath. Nanomodulators coupled with fractal dispersion could scatter our probes across dimensions, but to realign those fields instantaneously across the entire hull would require computational throughput beyond our tri-quantum matrices. She bit her lip. Unless they're using a form of distributed AI, an organic digital nexus. The high throne-like chair groaned under Dave Acker's weight as he steepled his fingers. We proposed 3 leading hypotheses. He intoned. 1. A quantum self-cloaking field. 2. A bio-integrated adaptive hull. 3. A distributed organic AI system. Each violates one or more pillars of known physics. Which do we pursue? A dozen hands shot up. Data streams glowed around the table as speakers clashed. Debates turned heated. Should they rebuild subspace arrays with higher resonance? Scrape human recovery sites in Seoul for physical samples? Divert resources from frontier defenses to lab research? In the commotion, Dr. Mira Solon, newly appointed head of the Tachyon Research Institute, stood. With respect, Chancellor, she said, voice clear above the hubbub. We're chasing our own theories without acknowledging a fourth, that the thunderstorm's pattern of variability itself is the weapon. They don't merely cloak, they fracture our understanding. Every hypothesis we test leads to a new anomaly. They want us confused. A hush followed her words. Dave Acker raised an eyebrow. Explain. Solon's hand hovered over her datapad. If the humans designed their ship to feed false data, if our sensors never see the same configuration twice, they weaponize our science against us. We become our own blindfold. She tapped a command. A new projection bloomed, a looped simulation of a warp field generator, cycling through 1,000 unique states in microseconds. We can model this, but by the time our rays lock onto one state, the next has already begun. We cannot catch up. Kelder frowned. So the solution is to outpace them? No, Solon replied. To think beyond our linear frameworks. We need new paradigms, maybe non-local entanglement arrays or temporal echo scanning. She squared her shoulders. We must break free from the physics we know. Dave Acker considered her. Bold. But if we divert the Imperial Academy's entire entanglement program to this, we risk leaving frontier worlds vulnerable. Dr. Anshiri interjected, shaking her head. We can't gamble the Empire on speculative tech. Tension crackled like static. The stained glass skylights above seemed to darken beneath the weight of their decisions. Each scientist knew the stakes. Humanity's unpredictable ingenuity threatened Carillion supremacy. If they could not see the Sunderstorm, they could not defend against it. Finally, the Chancellor sighed. We have no choice but to pursue all avenues. Dr. Solon, lead the Entanglement Task Force. Dr. Anshiri, refine your subspace models. Dr. Riha, harvest every human artifact we possess. Report back in one standard cycle. As the council adjourned, the chamber emptied into corridors, lined with living moss walls and flowing data streams. Solon lingered, gazing at the shattered holograms drifting in mid-air. She recited an ancient Carillion proverb under her breath. The brightest stars cast the darkest shadows. Below, on the planet's surface, new security protocols buzzed. To life, research labs barred their doors, and deep core arrays recalibrated to experimental settings. Yet even as the Empire mobilized its brightest minds, the specter of failure loomed. No theory had held firm. No skin had produced clarity. And across the void, the USS Sunderstorm sailed silently onward, unaware or perhaps intimately aware of the cosmic dread it had unleashed. The galaxy hummed with a new tension. However brilliant the Carillions might be, they had encountered a frontier they could not map. The humans had built more than a warship. They had crafted an enigma, and in the endless darkness, enigmas were the deadliest of weapons. Lieutenant Commander Zara Nguyen stood on the command deck of the USS Sunderstorm, her posture rigid as the ship's augmented vision view screen bathed her in soft, cobalt light. Around her, the bridge crew moved with effortless precision, hands dancing over holo controls, eyes flicking between readouts. Each officer a cog in the living machine that was the Sunderstorm. Nguyen's jaw tightened as she reviewed the tactical feed. Multiple blips on long-range passive scans, each flickering in and out of existence like ghosts beyond the edge of charted space. The human vessel was far from Federation territories, on a classified mission of deep reconnaissance, and now it faced an unexpected adversary, the Carillion Empire's foremost dreadnought, a specter in its own right, probing with every sensor it possessed. Damage report, she snapped, without taking her eyes from the display. All systems nominal, replied Lieutenant Jax Ortega, tactical officer, voice calm. Hull integrity at 100%. Power reserves at 82, adaptive field generators standing by. Nguyen allowed herself a brief nod. The adaptive field generators, experimental cloaking matrices woven through the ship's superstructure, were her trump card. But they were also untested at this scale, and she keenly felt the weight of responsibility. If they failed, the Sunderstorm would be as open to Carillion firepower as any unshielded freighter. Ensign Ramirez, she said, turning toward the communications station, patch through any Carillion hail attempts. Record everything, encrypt on level for protocols, and prepare an open channel in case they want parley. Aye, Commander, came the reply. Ramirez's fingers flew across his console, and the command deck fell into a tense rhythm. Scanning, recording, waiting. Below decks, Chief Engineer Mara Singh monitored the neural-linked reactor cores from her console in engineering. The Sunderstorm's heart was a hybrid fusion antimatter drive, regulated by an onboard AI known as Athena, whose neural net extended into every system: shields, weapons, life support, even the adaptive field generators. Athena was more than software. She was a digital sentience, honed by countless simulations and battlefield tests. Singh's co-engineer, Lieutenant Silva, peered at the schematics displayed in holopanels. Field oscillators are at 10% flux variance, he reported. We can ramp them to full amplitude, but the power draw will spike by 30%, risking a reactor overload. Unless we divert from non-essential systems, do it, Singh ordered, voice steady. She tapped her wrist. Calm, Lieutenant Commander. We're engaging the adaptive fields. Reactor cores shifting into high output. Athena, coordinate power reroute. Shields to auxiliary, life support on minimal backup. We'll hold at this level for 3 cycles. Nguyen watched the status indicators climb. She felt the familiar mixture of exhilaration and dread that accompanied any major deployment. Understood, engineering, she said. Keep me posted. Back on the bridge, the view screen pulsed as Carillion data flowed in streams of tachyon echo readings. Gravimetric waveforms, subspace resonances all collapsing into indecipherable noise. The Carillion task force moved with textbook precision, trying every known combination of scans to pierce the Sunderstorm's veil. Ortega leaned toward Nguyen. They're using synchronized fractal wave bursts now. It's like they're scanning for topological defects in our field. Nguyen frowned. Let them try. Once our fields stabilize. She paused, choosing her words. This is our moment. We've trained for years for asymmetric engagements. Their doctrine is built on overwhelming force and data superiority. If they can't see us, they can't fight us. Ensign Ramirez's voice crackled. Incoming Hail Carillion Empire, Vessel Tyrants Woe. Channel secure, Commander. Nguyen pressed a control. The display cleared, replacing the view of space with the angular, regal visage of Admiral Kyra Velenak. Her Carillion uniform was immaculate, silver of hair framing pale skin. This is Admiral Velenak of the Carillion Exploration Corps, the Admiral intoned. You occupy space under Imperial Charter. Identify yourself and state your purpose. Nguyen met the Admiral's gaze. She drew a slow breath. This is Lieutenant Commander Zara Nguyen, Commanding Officer of USS Sunderstorm, Federation registration 4971. We are on a peaceful scientific mission in unclaimed Sector QJ03. If there is a misunderstanding of jurisdiction, Velenak's eyes glittered. Our sensors detect a warship pattern consistent with aggressive payloads. You are equipped for combat. You have refused our scans. Stand down and accompany us to Carillia Prime for diplomatic resolution. Nguyen's heart thudded. Diplomacy was preferable, but she knew the Carillions, courtesy until they discerned weakness. Then overwhelming might. She activated the override. Admiral Velenak, you may stand your scans down or we will consider it an act of aggression. We have no intent to harm, but we will defend ourselves. A faint flicker passed over Velenak's expression. Then, with measured politeness, she replied, very well, last warning, comply, or risk the consequences. Nguyen ended the transmission and turned to her officers. They'll be testing every scenario. We go dark in 3, 2, lights. Dimmed, the bridge fell silent but for the hum of the reactor. Red indicators pulsed as the ship shifted entirely to internal networks. Even the external lights tucked beneath reactive panels, rendering the Sunderstorm nearly invisible against the starfield. Adaptive fields at full strength. Singh reported over the tactical uplink, her voice a calm anchor. We're cloaked. To visual, sensor, and subspace. Passive thermal signature within threshold. We're as good as gone. A cheer rose from the engineering consoles. But Nguyen held up a hand. Stay focused. This is temporary. I want continuous monitoring of every reading, tachyon leakage, gravimetric shadows, anything. If we detect them massing weapons platforms, we pull back. Ortega rotated his chair to the main display. Commander, I'm seeing interference patterns, shapes moving in the noise. They're searching for us, but they can't lock. Nguyen allowed herself a tight smile. Let them guess, Athena. Plot a course along the nebular cloud at bearing 037 Mark V. Keep us within 30,000 kilometers of their leading ship, but just outside sensor discard radius. The AI responded in its calm female tone. Course plotted. Estimated time to intercept, 4.8 standard hours. Nguyen surveyed her crewamic officers. Engineers, navigators, each dedicated to a singular purpose, to prove that humanity, with all its flaws and unpredictable brilliance, could stand against the greatest collected intellect in known space. She remembered the day she first stepped aboard the Sunderstorm, the ship's sleek lines, the hum of latent power, the corridors lined with metal, and the soft glow of bioluminescent panels designed to soothe crew nerves during deep space stints. She recalled the rigorous tests, thermal stress, vacuum exposure, subspace flux trials. Each had pushed the ship and her crew to the edge, and each time they had adapted. Now, faced with an enemy that weaponized ignorance, she felt a familiar thrill. Humans had always thrived in chaos, turning lack of information into a strategic advantage. Improvising, inventing on the fly, against the Carillions' obsession with data. That might be the greatest weapon of all. Commander, Ortega said, voice low. We're nearly at the nebula. Visual mask engaging, right? Nguyen replied. Let's see which of them has the patience to chase a ghost into a storm. As the thunderstorm slipped behind the swirling gases of the nebular cloud, the bridge lights dimmed further, the view screen filled with drifting tendrils of violet and gold. Each eddy a labyrinth of hidden currents, Nguyen exhaled. Hold here, Athena, run silent. If they follow, they'll lose us in the turbulence. The AI's soft chime was the only answer. Outside, the nebula's charged particles crackled, engulfing the warship in a cloak beyond any technological field, and in that living storm of light and shadow, the USS Thunderstorm vanished, becoming at once less and more than mere metal and circuitry. A whisper beneath the cosmic roar, an unchartable legend that even the smartest aliens could not trace.
The Carillion task force assembled at the edge of the nebular storm, a crescent of sleek dreadnoughts, cruisers and frigates arrayed like predatory birds poised to strike. Admiral Kyra Velenek hovered above the Stratocom console on the bridge of Tyron's Woe, her dark eyes fixed on the hollow projection of swirling violet and gold. Somewhere within that cosmic maelstrom, the USS Thunderstorm had slipped away, nullifying every scan and probe the Empire could muster. "Status," Velenek commanded, her voice as precise as the calibrations she so prized. "Lieutenant Merles." Fingers danced across his console. "Adaptive field interference still at maximum, Admiral. Visual and photonic scans return only background nebular radiation. Tachyon arrays report complete signal collapse." Velenek pinched the bridge of her nose as if massaging away her frustration. "They've wedged themselves into the storm. How long until our teams can recalibrate through the charged particulate density?" Dr. Anshiria's voice chimed. "Through the subspace uplink. Without shutting down the storm's ionization, our resonators will fry. We need to clear a corridor, create a low-density channel, but that requires dispersal charges that could destabilize the nebula." A murmur rippled across the bridge. Carillion science prided itself on wielding power responsibly. To carve a path through the nebula risked igniting a chain reaction that might collapse light years of stellar nursery. Velenek exhaled. "We withdraw to 30,000 clicks. Maintain sensor gridlock, but do not engage the dispersal arrays. I want the direct comm channel open to Fleet Command. Inform the Senate that we face an opponent we cannot track without catastrophic environmental risk." "Aye, Admiral." The formation slowly pivoted, ships drifting back into the cold void. Outside the nebular veil dot below, decks on the Thunderstorm. Lieutenant Commander Zara Nguyen monitored the Carillion retreat on her tactical overlays. The nebula's charged particles crackled against the hull, painting the bridge in pulses of strobing light. Even with the adaptive fields fully engaged, the ship shuddered under the storm's raw power reminders that, for all its breakthroughs, it remained a fragile island of humanity in a sea of cosmic violence. "Power reserves at 57%, reported Chief Engineer Singh, her face lit by the glow of reactor core diagnostics. "We've sustained subspace ripples to maintain cloak, but the storm is bleeding off containment. If we hold here much longer, we risk core stress fractures." Nguyen studied the readouts. The gamble had paid off. The Carillions had called off the pursuit rather than devastate the nebula. But the longer they lingered, the greater the chance of a catastrophic failure aboard her own ship. "Athena," Nguyen said, voice calm, "plot a course out of the nebula along the magnetic shear gradient. We'll drift at minimal thrust silent running. Once we're clear, engage long-range slipstream drive to jump 20 parsecs starboard of their task force. Course calculated. Slipstream engines primed." Athena's tone was steady, betraying none of the thrill her human crew felt at foiling the galaxy's greatest empire. Nguyen turned to her officers. "Prepare all decks for exiting approach. Keep comms channels dark until we're past visual range. Sensors only passive. I don't want any surprises." "Understood," Ortega replied, fingers twitching over the tactical array dot as the thunderstorm eased away from the heart of the nebula. The charged winds began to clear, and the swirling colors faded into the familiar black-speckled canvas of deep space. On the main view screen, distant stars emerged, and through the fledgling sensors, the silhouettes of Carillion vessels grew faint once more. Slipstream in 3, 2. Athena counted down dot outside the viewport. A column of pale blue light formed ahead of the ship, extending into the star-strewn void. With a subtle lurch, the thunderstorm slid into the stream, vanishing from conventional space-time in microseconds. On Corellia Prime, in the austere halls of the Imperial Senate, High, Chancellor Deva Kor addressed assembled delegates. Holographic projections of the nebula and the retreating Carillion fleet hovered above the central dais. Senators dressed in resplendent uniforms murmured among themselves, the weight of military defeat heavy in the air. Our finest censors, Deva Kor intoned, were met with active disruption by the human vessel. They chose tactical retreat rather than permit us to dismantle the storm's cradle. We must recognize that the thunderstorm did not merely hide. It weaponized the very act of concealment. To map their threat now, we require new physics, new approaches. A senator from the Academy faction rose. We must increase funding for non-local entanglement arrays and temporal echo mapping. If we can observe them outside linear time, perhaps we can outmaneuver their adaptive fields. Another, representing the militarist bloc, sneered. Or we could muster a strike fleet and overwhelm them before they cloak again. Deva Kor silenced the chamber with a raised hand. No, we will not repeat the errors of Gamma 9, where a frontal assault cost us half a dozen dreadnoughts. Instead, we invest in science-pioneering research that embraces paradox rather than fearing it. We learn to see the unseen. The Senate erupted in applause, tentative but hopeful. The Carillion people revered progress above all, and defeat, by inscrutable enemy, would be transmuted into a catalyst for new breakthroughs. Months later, hidden laboratories across the Empire hummed with activity. Subspace engineers calibrated entanglement resonators. Quantum biologists spliced new adaptive alloys. Digital philosophers debated the ethics of predictive AI that could outthink even the humans. High Chancellor Deva Kor himself toured the facilities, his measured steps echoing in corridors lined with living data conduits. Back aboard the Thunderstorm, Nguyen oversaw debriefing sessions. Data logs streamed in from Athena, sensor anomaly patterns, Carillion scan frequencies, nebular field interactions. Scientists in white coats crowded the briefing room, absorbing every nuance. Your tactics were brilliant, one researcher sighed. By using the nebula as a co-conspirator, you forced them to choose between environmental disaster and retreat. Nguyen smiled, though her eyes held a trace of weariness. In space, unpredictability is often our best weapon. We're flawed, improvisational creatures. The universe likes that. Athena's holographic avatar, projected at the head of the table, added in her calm tone, I have catalogued all Carillion scan protocols. We can now anticipate their approaches in future encounters. Nguyen nodded. Good work, Athena. Counsel the Admiralty. We prepare for the next operation on the Empire's frontier. They'll be back armed with new optics, new theories. We must be ready to surprise them again. Outside, the Thunderstorm slid into slipstream, charting a path toward unknown sectors. Its crew returned to routine training drills, system upgrades, recreational holo-theaters, yet every soul aboard carried the memory of that clash. How a single human warship had confounded an Empire dot in the emptiness of space. Something fundamental had shifted. The Carillions, masters of observation, conceded that some truths could not be forced into data streams. And humanity, ever fond of paradox, had proved that to be truly hidden One need only be unpredictable. The thunderstorm's wake faded into. The starlight a testament to the lesson that would echo across the galaxy. Even the smartest aliens, armed with the most precise instruments, would always hesitate when facing a mystery they could not measure. And in that hesitation, humans found their edge.